Okay, so today I thought I'd talk about the Knitmaster Zippy 90, or as it's also known as, the Singer LK100. And in fact this particular model is, as I say, a Knitmaster Zippy 90, but if you look at the model number on the back here, it is in fact an LK100. Sorry it's upside down, you probably still see it. So yeah, in the United States this machine was sold as the Singer LK100, but in the UK, not sure about anywhere else, but it was sold as the Knitmaster Zippy 90. Basically it's exactly the same machine, the only difference is the Singer LK100 had blue and grey as the colour scheme, whereas this is pink and grey, similar to the LK150. And in fact this machine is very similar, or in fact almost the same in design as to the LK150. The only difference really is the gauge and the number of needles on the bed, and of course the width of the actual bed itself. And I think, oh yeah, there's also the tension mast on the LK150, but this has its own little tension mast type thing, which I'll show you in a few minutes. So the reason this is called the Zippy 90 is because it has 90 needles, but however, as I said, the model number is LK100. And what I like about these machines is they have these little roller glidey things on the back of the needle butts, and they're also marked in increments of 5 in different colours. So obviously you've got 5 in pink, 5 in grey, 5 in pink, 5 in grey, all the way along, so it simplifies counting. And they're very easy to move. This machine I did get second hand because of course you can't purchase this one anymore, unlike the LK150. And the sponge that keeps the tension on the needles had worn, because over time sponge does degrade, and it was useless basically, so I had to replace the sponge bar in it. So when you tip the bed up like this, all the needles should stay back like that. If they're all starting to fall forward like that when you tip it forward, then the sponge in it is no good and you need to replace it. But it's very simple to do. It's a bit time consuming, but that's another matter. So anyway, basically it's very simple to set up. You only really need 5 things, and that is the bed itself, the clamps, the row counter, the tension spring and the carriage. So of course you need it set up on a flat table, as you do with all knitting machines. You just slide the clamps in, and there's 2 slots on either side of the machine. Just slide them in and tighten them up. I believe at the time when you could have bought this new, there were extension kits available similar to like the Bond sweater machines and the Bond machines, but I don't think there'll be many of those around today. I don't think you can get them for the LK150 either. Whether you could do in the past, I don't know, but anyway, once we've got the clamps in, you just put the row counter on the back. There's 2 slots, you can either have it on the right or on the left, which is helpful when you're doing partial knitting. I like to have it on the right since I'm right-handed. Then you pick up the carriage and hook it over the front of the needle bed, just like that. See, it goes on at an angle on the front first, and then it just clicks down. That's it. If you wiggle it a bit like that, it should stay in place. Then you just lift the handle up, that's locked in place, ready for use. And the last thing is to attach the tension spring, making sure it fits in the right position. It'll only go in one way. So that's the machine set up, very simple. So you do get other tools. You get the 3 cast-on combs, which you can couple together, and these accommodate the entire bed, all 3 of them together, but each one of these will cover 30 stitches, and it is every other needle. So it's when you're doing an alternate cast-on, that's how you would cast on with those. They do have little holes in for you to hang weights as well. You get 2 claw weights as well. Excuse me. And you also get your little bag of tools. You could open it. Sorry about this. There we go. So in your little goodie bag here, you get a needle pusher, which is a straight edge, and the comb side, which is for every other needle, like that. You get your 2 comb connectors. You get 3 transfer tools, 2 3-prongs, 2 1-prongs and 2 2-prongs. You get a latch tool, ravel cord, a bottle of oil, and for some reason there's another one in there, but you get a tapestry needle as well. And of course your instruction manual. So that's everything with the machine, and it's set up. So I'm going to cast on here. I'm going to cast on 30 stitches, so 15 each side of 0. So I'm going to bring every needle forward to start with, and then I'm going to turn the comb over and push back every other needle like that. Now we want to thread the carriage. Now I'm using chunky weight yarn, which in my opinion is the best yarn to use with this machine, as well as Aran or worsted weight. If you get anything thinner like sport weight double knitting, it doesn't tend to go too well with this machine. Depends what type of double knit sport weight yarn it is. Some are thicker than others, but you just have to experiment a bit. But a chunky machine does do better with thicker yarn, so you won't get away with a lot of double knit yarns, especially not 4-ply, UK 4-ply that is, or I believe it's called fingering. So to thread the machine you want the loose end of yarn pointing upwards, and it wants to hook into this little, oops, without dropping it on the floor. Again, with the loose end pointing up, you want to pass it between that little guide there, and then if you look at this little piece, this is a tension disc. Well, it's not a disc, but it's like this little slider thing. See, it's spring loaded, and that puts tension on the yarn, and you want to pass the yarn through there so it clicks in between it, like that. Then you want to go around the take-up spring, like this. Then finally, this is again your tail end. You want to just push that into the carriage, making sure that it goes well into place. Like that, and it should look like this. And since I don't have a free hand to hold that loose piece of yarn, I'll tie it to the clamp. So you want to set your dial to whatever size weight yarn you're using, rather. Oops, make sure that stays in there. So this one knits on about a 7, but it does go from 1 to 9, but like I said, this is a 7 for this yarn. So I'm on every other needle. I'm just going to take the carriage across, and that has deposited yarn into every needle. Well, sorry, every other needle. Then I'm going to take my comb and hang it on. You would cast on like this with waste yarn, by the way. You wouldn't start a garment with this method of casting on. And then you would bring the tail end round this little clip to hold it in place. And I'm just going to put a claw weight on there to hold that down. You do have to knit with a comb in place on this machine. Now I do have the LK100 and you can get away with not using a comb when knitting normally. But with this machine I found that the comb pulling down on the knitting really does help, because otherwise it tends to get loose and jump up out the hooks of the needles and it can make you shout. So anyway, the comb's in place. Now I'm going to bring the remaining needles back into working position, and again, because they're colour coded, it really does help. So you would definitely tell if I missed that needle there, because I've got 30, so I want to make sure all those are in work. So now it's just a case of going back and forth until you get to the length you want, or your shaping starts or whatever. I'm just here to demonstrate this machine, because I haven't found many videos on YouTube of this particular machine. So anyway, I'm going to set my counter back to 0, because this would be the beginning of the knitting now. So here we go. And although it doesn't use a tension mast, it does still take the slack yarn up on its own. You don't have to pull the slack back like you do on a bond knitting machine. That's what this spring's for. So basically, unlike most knitting machines, the yarn is on the floor in front of you rather than behind the machine, because obviously the yarn feeds from the front of the carriage there. So, as you can see, I've got all this slack here, and as I pull the carriage across, that little tension spring that's fixed to the carriage will bring the slack up for me. So, that's how that works. So, and it does, if you were to push it right to the end like that, it will still, and there's quite a lot of slack there, it'll still bring it up. If you see what I mean, you might think that it only bring it back about that far, and it wouldn't have much use. But there you go. Hopefully you can see what I mean. I might just be talking rubbish. Very easy to use. And just say you wanted to change colours or something, or you were starting with an E-wrap cast on, say, you will just want to re-thread it in reverse of the way I showed you how to thread it when I started knitting. So, be that it goes through the carriage first. Again, this is if you're starting with an E-wrap cast on where the yarn is already attached to the needles and you're not starting with a loose end, then this is how you would thread it. You would, like I said, bring it through the carriage first, which is nigh on impossible to do with one hand. There we go. So that's through the eye of the carriage, then over the tension spring, through the little tension spring there, which keeps the tension on the yarn. If you didn't have it hooked through there, this little mechanism thing wouldn't work properly. As you can see, it'd just be loose. So it has to go through there. the little tension thing to keep the tension on the spring there, and then finally through that little guide. But that's all there is to it. That's the Knitmaster Zippy 90 or the LK100. Very nice little machine, very easy and quick to use and set up, and it does produce some nice knitting. So of course this is just plain stocking stitch. Just take it off to show you. There we go. Whoops. Sorry about that, that was a message. But yeah, it does produce some nice knitting. So there you go. That's the Knitmaster Zippy 90, or in other else known, the LK100. Very nice machine. So there you go. Hope you found this interesting.